During 1883, livestock across rural Kansas started dying from an unknown cause. The killings followed a pattern no predator had ever displayed: violence without feeding, devastation without reason. Henry Wallace, a farmer in the area, began jotting down these events in his diary. His notes would eventually become one of the most chilling records of America's frontier era. As Wallace pursued the mystery, his diary entries themselves started shifting. His penmanship grew shaky, and his memories began to splinter. Then, bit by bit, and horrifyingly, he understood that the creature wasn't his quarry. He was morphing into it. For other accounts drawn from secret archives, venture into the eerie world of the Encounter Archives, where folklore stops and the unspeakable takes over. The 3rd of April, 1883, at Wallace Farm, Kansas. The pens felt strange this morning, too hushed for my liking. I spotted Bessie, our milk cow, sprawled awkwardly in the mud by the trough. Her neck was caved in. Her throat had been flattened like someone hammered it with a mallet. What struck me as odd was the lack of blood. The wound seemed pressed inward, not torn open, and not a clean bite like a wolf's. I've lived on this land for 11 years and have witnessed plenty of predator kills, coyotes mostly. The occasional mountain lion wandering through. This isn't like those. The meat hasn't been touched. No hungry animal leaves a fresh carcass to waste. Martha suspects it might be dogs turned wild, but I've never heard of a dog with enough jaw strength to do that to Bessie's neck. Jacob Miller stopped by around noon to get the post digger. I told him what had happened to Bessie. He said he'd lost 2 chickens the other day. Found them strewn across his yard with broken necks, but none missing. We figured it was just coincidence, different animals, different patterns. Still, there was something in his eyes as he left, the same anxiety that's been gnawing at me since morning. I should write to my brother in Pennsylvania. He always said the frontier was too wild, too unpredictable. Martha laughed at that back then. But she isn't laughing tonight. The wind started blowing harder, and I can hear the barn door rattling. I've already secured it twice. The 7th of April, 1883. I came upon another dead calf at sunrise. This one belonged to the Hendersons, about 2 miles east. Samuel Henderson showed up after breakfast with his face ashen like a winter sky. The calf had been dragged away from the pen, with fence boards splintered outward, not torn by claws. Whatever carried it off was incredibly strong. I rode over to look for myself. The carcass lay in the tall grass, maybe 40 yards from the pen. The neck was decimated, just like Bessie, crushed from both sides. But what made me freeze was the grass around the body. It was matted down in a rough circle, like something had been pacing there. The distance between steps didn't match a wolf too long, too irregular. Samuel's boy, Thomas, mentioned hearing a noise that night, like a man screaming, but deeper and more guttural. He thought it was just his imagination until he discovered the calf this morning. I told him that screams get distorted across the prairie wind, especially at night. I'm not sure I even believed what I said. Martha questioned me tonight about whether I'd been sleeping well. She says I've been tossing around and muttering in my sleep. I don't recall any of it. I told her it was nothing more than stress over the livestock. She nodded. But later, I noticed her staring at my hands, at the scratches across my knuckles. I probably scraped them on the barn door latch. I honestly can't think of anything else that could have caused them. On this, the 10th of April, 1883, the moon glowed 3/4 full. bright enough to read by. Jacob Miller arrived this morning, rifle still in hand, to tell me about something he had fired at the previous night. He recounted hearing his horses scream around midnight. Not the usual frightened whinnies, but pure, unbridled terror. By the time he'd pulled on his boots and reached the yard, he saw a shape moving through his corn rows. He kept repeating that it was upright. Henry like a man, yet something seemed wrong. The legs didn't look right, and the knees appeared to bend backward. He let off 3 shots and is certain at least one found its target. The figure gave no response whatsoever, no cry of pain, no grunt upon being struck. It simply turned and dashed into the darkness, covering ground faster than any man could possibly run. Jacob trailed the bloodstains for roughly 20 yards before they abruptly vanished. No body, no more blood, just crushed corn and quiet. I was at a loss for words. Martha thinks he may have been drinking. But I've known Jacob for 8 years. He's not a man who drinks, and he doesn't give in to panic. Whatever he saw, he genuinely believed in it. After lunch, we rode out to his land together and found the spent cartridges exactly where he had said. The corn rows were disturbed, and on some of the stalks, we noticed what could have been blood. The substance was dark and thick, already browning beneath the sun. There were no tracks or clear footprints, only scattered depressions in the soft soil that could have been made by anything. Sheriff Brooks came to the Miller farm while we were looking around. He'd been checking the area ever since the Henderson boy had reported the calf. He wrote in his small leather notebook and asked all the usual questions. When Jacob brought up the upright figure, Brooks's pencil froze mid-motion. He raised his head, fixed his eyes on Jacob for a long moment, and then went back to writing without a word. Before he took off, Brooks pulled me aside. "Sleeping well, Henry?" he asked. I gave him the same answer I'd given Martha, just concerned about the animals. He nodded slowly, then left me with something that has weighed on me all evening. A strange thing, worry. It can push a man to do things he doesn't even remember. When I asked him to explain, he simply tipped his hat and rode off the 13th of April, 1883. I'm writing this entry by lamplight, and my hands are unsteady. The full moon rose last night, and for the first time in weeks, nothing happened. No attacks, no cries. The animals stayed calm. I slept through the entire night without waking once, and Martha confirmed it this morning. She said I never even stirred. This should bring relief, but it doesn't. It feels like the hush between lightning and thunder. Jacob came by around mid-morning. He looked exhausted, with dark circles carved under his eyes. He told me he'd spent the whole night with his rifle, watching the corn rows. Nothing came, and his horses stayed peaceful. He seemed almost let down, which struck me as curious until I realized I shared that same feeling. We had both braced for something terrible, and its absence felt like a vow broken. This afternoon, the community gathered at the church for a meeting. Nearly every farmer within 10 miles was there. Sheriff Brooks stood at the front and calmly, systematically laid out the facts. 7 livestock deaths in the span of 10 days, all within 5 miles of each other, all with similar wounds. None of the animals had been eaten, and no clear predator had been found. Reverend Michaels thought we might be facing a pack of wolves driven mad by disease. Jacob spoke up and described what he'd witnessed. The upright figure, the knees that bent the wrong way, the unnatural speed. Some people nodded. Others looked down at their boots. One of the Thompson boys muttered something about Indian spirits. and his father shot him a sharp look. Brooks proposed that we set up hunting parties over the next several nights, with a rotation so armed men could guard the most vulnerable properties in shifts. Everyone agreed, and I volunteered for tomorrow night's watch at the Henderson place. Martha wasn't happy about it, but she didn't argue. When I got home, I spotted mud on the kitchen floor, thick, dark mud with bits of prairie grass embedded in it. It was the kind of mud you find by the low creek bed beyond the north pasture. Martha swore she'd mopped that floor the previous afternoon, and I believe her. I checked my boots. They were clean. I went to the back door, and it was latched from the inside, just as I'd left it. I cleaned up the mud without saying anything to Martha. No point in troubling her more. But I can't stop thinking about what Brooks said about worry making a man do things he doesn't remember. The 17th of April, 1883. The watch parties have been going for 4 nights now. Nothing. No attacks, no sightings, no disturbances. The full moon has faded to a thin sliver. The townsfolk are beginning to ease their worry, as though whatever troubled us has finally departed. Only Jacob continues his nightly watch, and even that now seems pointless. Yet, I've started paying attention to small inconsistencies. Yesterday, I rose to find scratches on my forearms, new ones, still raised and red. Martha questioned whether I had been in the brambles. I said yes, but in truth, I had no memory of it. My trousers and shirt from the day before were stained with mud at the knees and edges. Even though there had been no rain, I had passed most of the day fixing the barn roof. When morning came, my boots sat by the back entrance, laces knotted, mud from the creek clinging to their soles. I clearly recall taking them off at the front door the night before and placing them on the drying rack. Martha gave me an odd look when I asked whether she had moved them, then said, maybe I had done it myself while asleep. I have no recollection. Now I find myself examining my journal with greater care. Just this afternoon, I reviewed the last 2 weeks of entries and discovered something that chilled me. The way I write has transformed. At first, the script is clean and uniform. But from about April 10th onward, the letters lean farther to the side, and the gaps between words grow uneven. Certain phrases are pressed into the paper with such force they break through to the following page. On April 14th, I found a passage I have no memory of composing. It reads, "The moon tugs at something within me. I sense it shifting under my skin, uneasy and craving." I handed the journal to Martha. Her face turned white. She wondered if I had started drinking again. Yet I haven't touched liquor for months. She proposed that I might be unwell. A fever could bring confusion and missing hours. I told her it must be that. Still, I don't feel weak. If anything, I feel more vigorous than I have in a long while. Another detail caught my attention this evening. As I washed before supper, studying my hands in the basin, the nails looked darker at the base, almost discolored, and when I curled my fingers, there was something in the joints, not quite pain, but a feeling of readiness, as if they had a desire to move strangely. Jacob appeared at nightfall, looking worse than ever. His eyes were red, and his hands shook. He described dreams in which he pursued some creature through the cornfield. Whenever he closes in, he sees that it runs on all fours and has his own face. He laughed as he said this, but it came out harsh and hollow. I advised him to rest. He agreed, though I knew he was lying. The moon is waxing once more. It is 3/4 full tonight, visible through the window as I write. The light is stronger than I recall, almost painful to gaze upon. Martha has called out from the bedroom, wondering if I will join her. I said I would soon, yet sleep eludes me. Instead, I feel a growing unease. A tingling sensation rises beneath the surface of my skin, beginning in my hands and moving upward through my arms. It is not bothersome at all. It carries a kind of thrill. My thoughts keep drifting to the cattle, their broken necks, the flesh left uneaten, and the notion of harm that had no appetite behind it. I ought to set down the pen and retire. Yet instead, my feet carry me to the window, and I gaze across the land. The grass shimmers with a silver sheen under the moon. Beside the creek, the trees stand as dark outlines against the night. A figure is stirring in the distance, at the boundary of the property where the prairie growth reaches its full height. Though it is too distant to see distinctly, I can tell it is massive and headed in the direction of the house. But I have mistaken it. It is not approaching. It is moving in the opposite direction. This is written from memory. On the 20th of April, 1883. 2 nights ago, the 17th, my writing ended at that final sentence. When morning came, I discovered the journal lying on the floor. Next to it was a dried-out pen, and ink had stained the page. The entry broke off without concluding. Martha told me she had gone to sleep at 3 in the morning. The grass was wet with dew, and my bare feet were caked with mud. None of it is clear to me. What I recall is waking utterly worn out, with my body aching as if I had been lifting fence posts all night. My throat felt raw, as though I had screamed. On top of that, deep scratches ran the length of both arms, from shoulders to wrists. At breakfast, when Martha caught sight of them, the coffee pot slipped from her hands and burst upon the floor. She stood frozen, staring at my arms with a look foreign to her face. Terror. She was frightened of me. I attempted to offer some reason, yet I had nothing to say. I suggested that I had likely been sleepwalking, that I had stumbled out into the brambles near the creek. I insisted the marks resembled thorn cuts. She gave a slow, automatic nod and started gathering the shattered pieces without speaking again. Throughout the day, I caught her watching me from the edges of her vision. In the afternoon, Sheriff Brooks stopped in, bringing news of another attack, this time at the Morrison farm, 6 miles north. In their enclosure, 3 sheep had been ripped apart, just like the earlier kills. Throats crushed, bones shattered, flesh uneaten. The incident occurred in the hours between midnight and daybreak on the 18th, the night following the full moon. Brooks wanted to know my whereabouts that evening. I claimed I was asleep at home. When he pressed whether Martha could vouch for me, I assured him she could, but the falsehood weighed on me. Martha was unconscious in bed, unable to verify a thing, and had she been awake, what explanation could I possibly offer? The truth is, I have no memory of my whereabouts. I woke to find mud caked on my feet and blood beneath my nails, with no explanation. Just before leaving, Brooks did something that struck me with dread. He pulled out his notebook and revealed a drawing he had made. Boot prints, Brooks explained, had turned up at 3 separate attack locations, identical in size, with matching heel wear. The right boot, a size 10, showed extra scuffing along the outer edge, the result of an ankle injury that had never fully healed. My boots are size 10. In 1879, I fractured my ankle in a fall from a horse, and it mended crookedly. Brooks fell silent, shut his notebook, tipped his hat to Martha, and rode off. Yet, I noticed his hand hovering near his pistol as he swung into the saddle. The 23rd of April, 1883. Jacob Miller has been found dead. His body was discovered this morning in the cornfield, about 40 yards from home. Next to him lay his rifle, both barrels spent. The crushing force applied to his throat had snapped neck bones through the skin, surrounding his corpse. The corn had been flattened in a broad ring, as though some creature had circled him for a long time. According to Samuel Henderson, who stumbled upon Jacob's remains, the eyes were wide open, fixed on the heavens. No terror in them. Henderson noted only a look of knowing. The burial is set for tomorrow. Martha says we must go. But I can hardly bear to look at Jacob's widow. I can't stop replaying our final encounter. He was worn out and shaking. He'd spoken of dreams where he pursued a figure through the corn, a figure wearing his own features. Lately, I've been dreaming in the same way. In those visions, I sprint across the prairie, under the vast glow of the moon. In these dreams, there is no fear. I'm not fleeing something, but charging toward it an unseen threshold I must cross, a metamorphosis I must finish. My body transforms too, becoming more powerful, more supple, and my hands no longer seem like hands. Even after waking, the lingering sensation of that power remains in my arms and legs. I catch myself longing to slip back into the dream, to cross that line and discover what lies beyond. This afternoon, I realized I'd been standing by the window for close to an hour, scanning the fields, waiting for evening to fall. Martha asked what had caught my attention. I replied that nothing had, yet that was a falsehood. I was searching for motion, for forms amid the grass, for evidence of the thing I'm turning into. I understand now. I've understood since examining Brooks's notebook, since finding those boot prints and knowing them as mine. The force that destroyed Jacob resides in me, and it grows more powerful. The 25th of April, 1883. I've gone over this note half a dozen times now. The final paragraph is unknown to me. I have no recollection of composing it. The script is undeniably my own. The slant, the way I form my T's, all familiar. Yet the sentences seem alien. It reads, Martha barred the bedroom door last night. I listened as the bolt shot into place. She believes I'm unaware, but my senses now catch every sound. The mice in the walls, the insects in the roof, through the door. Her heartbeat races, panicked like a rabbit's. Beneath that, written in darker ink with such force, the pen almost pierced the paper. I wanted to smash the door open. I wanted to convince her there was no danger, but I realize that's no longer true. I have no recollection of penning those lines. Yet, I remember the emotion. I recall standing before our bedroom door, palm pressed to the wood, aware of its rough texture. I remember sensing how simple it would be to shatter it, and how gratifying that noise of splintering would be. I spent last night in the barn, or at least made the attempt. Near midnight, I detected signs of something shifting in the rafters too substantial for a barn cat. I raised the lantern and inspected every nook, yet discovered nothing. Upon lying down again, it struck me that the noise had ceased the instant I began my search, as though the source of those sounds had been me from the very start. Come morning, I spotted scratches on the barn door, deep grooves in the timber, beginning roughly 7 feet up and running downward. They resembled claw marks. Yet, when I raised my hand beside them, my fingers matched the spacing exactly. I'm setting this down in the afternoon, seated at the kitchen table. Martha has gone to the Henderson place to join a sewing circle. She mentioned she wouldn't return until evening. There was no goodbye kiss, and she hasn't laid a hand on me for days. The moon is once again on the rise, well past half full. I can sense its influence even in the daylight, tugging at something far within me. My hands refuse to be still. I find myself continually clenching and releasing, noticing an odd energy within each knuckle. Earlier, I gripped the water pump's handle with such force that the metal actually warped. Perhaps I ought to grab a bag and head east. Putting this place behind me, I could distance myself from Martha and this entire farm. Yet I know I never will. For a part of me, one that strengthens with each passing day, has no desire to go. That part wants to remain here, to race across these fields under the cover of darkness. It longs to sense the grass underfoot, the moonlight on its skin, the raw strength in its muscles. It craves the hunt. The 28th of April, 1883, I discovered this journal lying open upon the kitchen table. I'm on my own these days. Martha departed yesterday, taking the wagon and her belongings, heading off to her sister's home in Lawrence. On the table, she left a note, written in a trembling hand. She wrote, "I can't keep watching you fade away. Come to me once you've become yourself again, if that ever happens." I don't fault her, for I witnessed exactly what she did. 3 nights ago, I came to consciousness in the North Field, without clothing, my body smeared with mud and grass. The sheep huddled in terror against the distant fence, blood visible on their bodies. One bore a long cut along its side, not deep, but clearly intentional, as if the perpetrator had been exercising controlled force. I have no recollection of exiting the house or crossing half a mile of my own land. Yet the dream I was in when I awoke remains vivid. I had been racing along on 4 limbs, and that motion felt inherently right, more so than walking on 2 feet ever has. This afternoon, Sheriff Brooks arrived with a pair of deputies. They scoured the barn, the outbuilding, and the root cellar. Brooks never stated what they sought. Yet, I understood. Their aim was evidence, bloodstains, shredded garments, anything to link me to those assaults. They uncovered nothing because I have been cautious. More precisely, the creature I turn into has been cautious. It leaves no traces on my own land. It ventures elsewhere, to the Morrison farm, the Henderson property, and Jacob Miller's cornfield. Just before he left, Brooks questioned me directly. "Henry, are you responsible for these, the killings?" Locking eyes with him, I said, "No, because the truth is, I am not responsible." This man, seated here writing these words, could never crush a cow's throat with his bare hands. He is weak, bewildered, frightened, but the being I turn into when the moon swells, that is an entirely different matter. Brooks studied my expression for a long while, then gave a slow nod. "I believe you," he told me. "However, belief does not alter facts. Those boot prints keep appearing size 10, with a worn-down heel. You are the sole man in the county who fits that description and could reach every site where attacks occurred." He instructed me to remain in town and said he would keep an eye on my land for the coming nights. He then departed with his deputies, leaving me by myself. Tonight the moon stands at 3/4 full. Already I sense the transformation beginning. My skin crawls with irritation, my joints throb, and a growing pressure presses behind my eyes, as if my skull can no longer contain whatever is expanding within. The sensible course would be to surrender, to place myself in a jail cell under Brooks's watch. Yet I know I won't, because once the moon ascends, the presence within me pays no heed to locks, iron bars, or noble intentions. It will always discover an escape it always has. The 1st of May, 1883. A note in the margin appears in unfamiliar script. This morning, I discovered my journal containing writing along the edge of yesterday's entry. The penmanship was rough and unsteady, similar to a child just learning to form letters. The message reads, "You fear the wrong thing. The monster is not what you transform into. It is what you have always been." I did not put those words there. Yet I know the ink well. It comes from my own pen. And no one else is present. The evening just past was the one before the full moon. I secured all the doors and piled up barriers in the root cellar, holding a lantern and this journal. My resolve was to remain awake, to record exactly what occurs as the transformation takes hold. My intention was to observe my own metamorphosis, to grasp its nature, perhaps to steer it. I recall taking a seat in the cellar as twilight settled, my back pressed against the coarse stone. I recall striking a flame in the lantern. I recall turning to a fresh page in this journal, ready to write. Then a void, nothing but an empty space where a recollection should exist. When consciousness returned, morning light was creeping in. I remained within the cellar, yet somehow found myself on the far side of the chamber. The journal lay open to an untouched page. The blockade. I had constructed 200 pounds of grain sacks, and worn furniture had been shifted away silently. The cellar door stood open. Outside, there were tracks to examine. My own boot marks headed from the cellar down to the creek, where they vanished at the water's edge. Upon the opposite bank lay different footprints, those of bare feet, yet their arrangement seemed off. The gaps stretched too long, and the toes fanned out in an unnatural manner. The tracks led north toward the Henderson property, and I pursued them. A mile from my farm, I came upon the aftermath of last night's assault. The Hendersons' draft horse was sprawled lifeless in the field. Its throat crushed the same recognizable pattern of devastation. Yet now something previously unseen was there. Something that sent a chill deep into my blood. The horse had only been lightly fed upon, though not entirely. The delicate flesh around the neck was missing, ripped away in uneven pieces. It felt as if the creature responsible had at last given in to its appetite and acknowledged its true desires. In the dawn glow, I stood before the lifeless animal and discovered an emotion that had eluded me for weeks: relief. I now understood those earlier killings were merely rehearsals. The creature within was perfecting its restraint, mastering the art of hunting without consuming. Yet that discipline is slipping, and the change is growing ever more thorough. Before long, nothing of Henry Wallace will remain, only the being that wears his flesh by daylight and prowls unbound beneath the night sky. I know I ought to alert someone, to ride into town and confess everything to Brooks. Yet the mere thought makes my fingers tremble, not from terror, but from fury. The force within me refuses to be contained, refuses to be halted, and its influence grows increasingly difficult to defy. The full moon arrives tonight. I sense its advance, like a gathering storm upon the horizon. My skin radiates heat when touched. My eyesight wavers between clarity and haze. Gazing at my own hands, I glimpse a form that is neither fully man nor beast. The nails have grown darker and thicker, while the joints twist at unnatural angles. Throughout the day, I have set down this account in pieces, pausing whenever the tremors grew too fierce to clutch the pen. Now the sun is sinking, and within the hour the moon will ascend. This may be my final entry written as Henry, as the man I once was. So I must commit these words to paper while I still possess the ability. I offer my apologies to Martha, to Jacob's widow, and to every household that has suffered the loss of animals or kin. I regret that I failed to comprehend this earlier, and I regret that I did not put a halt to it while the opportunity remained. Yet my remorse is not so deep that I would end this. For underneath the regret, below the guilt and dread, rests another emotion. Each lunar cycle has only intensified that feeling eager expectation. Through the window, I watch the moon climb, vast and gleaming silver. My flesh is parting, without blood, simply unfurling like a chrysalis. Just below the surface, I can see dark, rough fur. I must complete this and set down the reality before I lose the ability. Here is the truth. The monster is not seizing control. There is no invasion, no demonic takeover. The beast has dwelled within me all along, buried beneath decades of civility, church sermons, and wedding promises. The moon did not bring this about. It merely granted permission. And God was my aid, for which I am thankful. The entry is dated the 2nd of May, 1883. Although the mark was made 3 days afterward, time slipped away from me. I discovered this journal in the barn, tucked beneath the hay, though I have no recollection of stashing it there. The previous entry bore the date May 1st, yet Martha's calendar, still hanging in the kitchen, tells me today is May 2nd. A single day has gone by, and still I feel as though an entire lifetime unfolded within that lost span. When I woke, my garments lay in tatters, not from branches or brambles, but ripped from the inside, as if my frame had swollen and torn through the cloth. I came upon those remnants spread over the northern field, mingled with grass, soil, and a darker substance I refuse to acknowledge. They were at the creek crossing. Huge prints were stamped deep into the mire. They belonged to no pure human or beast. The span between steps reached almost 2 yards. The creature that left them was made for swiftness and the chase. I pursued those footprints toward the north and wound up at the Morrison farm. The sight that met me will remain with me for the rest of my days. 2 additional sheep lay dead, their necks broken in that all too recognizable pattern. Worse still, the barn door had been torn free of its hinges, and deep claw marks 4 inches into the posts scored the support beams. Tracks from boots. My boots trailed from the slaughter back toward my land. Samuel Morrison's little boy spotted me at the boundary of their property. He stood in the farmhouse doorway, no older than 10, eyes wide with fright. Lifting his hand, he pointed at me and spoke to his mother. She yanked him indoors and slammed the door, and I caught the sound of a lock clicking into place. Whether they know or merely guess, I cannot return there. Once I reached home, Sheriff Brooks stood waiting on my porch. He had company 4 armed townsmen positioned nearby, their rifles relaxed yet primed. Brooks wore a grave expression, a decade older than when I last laid eyes on him. "We need to talk, Henry," he said. "There was another attack last night. At the Morrison place and the Henderson farm, they discovered footprints, prints that lead straight to your land. I might have lied, might have feigned innocence, bewilderment, or claimed to be a victim of circumstance. Yet, I was weary, exhausted from all the deception, and so I confessed. I have no memory of my nighttime actions. I awaken with bloodied hands and blank stretches in my mind. If you've come to arrest me, I will not fight. A flicker of relief crossed Brooks's face. As though he had braced for a struggle, he urged me to go quietly, promising we'd settle matters in town, see a physician, and perhaps discover what was going on. I nearly agreed, nearly gave myself over to the judgment and compassion of my fellow men. Yet as I descended from the porch, my gaze landed on the moon faintly present in the daylight, still round and luminous. And, once more, that familiar tug returned, that sense of knowing. A quiet voice within me murmured, "They have no power over you. Chains and cages are meaningless. You've moved beyond their control." So I asked Brooks if I could fetch my coat from inside. He agreed and instructed his men to remain. Entering the house, I moved through the kitchen and slipped out the rear exit, then broke into a sprint. Shouts erupted behind me, followed by the sharp report of a rifle, and a bullet whizzed near enough to ruffle my hair. Still, I kept going. My flight carried me toward the creek, into the high grass, and beyond, into the untamed spaces where armed men rarely venture. I've spent the hours since midday concealed in a weathered grain shed at the far eastern edge of my land. And now the evening shadows are lengthening. Soon the moon will climb the sky, and the change will overtake me once more. But this time, I won't come to my senses in my own bed. There's no returning now. The entry is dated the 5th of May, 1883, taken from Sheriff Brooks's private journal and copied from the official record. Henry Wallace is still out there. Search teams have swept every corner within 10 miles, finding nothing. He has dissolved like vapor, leaving no trace. The violence continues unabated. Just last evening, 3 calves on the Peterson farm were slaughtered in the identical fashion. Thomas Henderson claimed to have spotted a shape moving upright through his wheat field near midnight, human in form, yet running with the stride of a beast. He discharged his rifle twice, hitting nothing. At dawn, Sarah Morrison discovered footprints beneath her children's window, the same imprints we've encountered at every scene of the attacks. She has moved the kids to her mother's home in Topeka, and I can't fault her for it. Meanwhile, the townsfolk are banding together to form their own search groups. Some blame wolves or rabid dogs, offering reasonable theories. Yet others murmur about far more ancient matters: hexes, shape-shifting, and the wickedness that roams beneath a full moon. I've worn a badge for 15 years, witnessed horrible deeds and flimsy justifications. But nothing in my experience compares to this. All signs lead back to Henry Wallace. The shoe impressions are a match, and the attacks trace outward from his land, with several eyewitnesses situating him close to the incidents. Still, the sheer physical impossibility of his alleged actions makes no sense. No human could traverse 6 miles of rugged landscape in under 60 minutes, rip open barn doors with bare hands, or collapse a horse's throat as effortlessly as breaking twigs, unless he has ceased to be human altogether. During my search of the Wallace property today, I uncovered something: a journal concealed inside the barn. I've gone through every page. In his own writing, the gradual decline is recorded, the lapses in memory, the shifts in his body, and the slow realization of what he was turning into. The closing passages unsettle me the most, not for their content, but for their tone. A transformation appears in the writing itself. The opening pages reflect terror and refusal to accept, but toward the end, a different emotion emerges: resignation, nearly enthusiasm. His final line reads, "The monster was always here." And I find myself trusting that. Locating Martha Wallace in Lawrence. We brought her in for an interview. She verified all of it, the wandering in his sleep, the injuries with no clear cause, and the night she woke to see him hovering beside the bed, his eyes catching the lamp's glow just as an animal's would. One remark she made has lingered with me. He was always gentle, always kind. Yet, occasionally, I'd observe him gazing at his own hands as if they weren't his, as though he expected them to transform into something they were destined to be. What exactly were they destined to become? That question torments me. Are we chasing after a man suffering from an illness or some form of insanity? Or are we pursuing something far more ancient? Something that simply inhabited Henry Wallace's form until it gained enough strength to break free. The moon is currently in its waning phase at 3/4 tonight. Should the existing pattern continue, the assaults might cease after tomorrow, but I doubt they will. In my judgment, whatever Henry Wallace has turned into is no longer governed by the phases of the moon. Its metamorphosis is complete. The date is the 8th of May, 1883, Henry's journal. Its last entry, discovered in an abandoned railroad shack 12 miles to the northwest of the Wallace farm. I'm putting these words down so that at least one person understands what actually happened. Not the version Brooks believes, nor the rumors circulating through town, but the genuine reality. I'm under no curse, no demonic influence, and no illness or insanity holds me. I am liberated. These past 3 days, I've dwelled in the untamed landscape past the farms and outposts. No enclosures, no routines, no pretense of being anything other than what I am. Never have I felt so authentic. On the first night following my escape, I attempted to resist the shift, to cling to my human form. Yet, as the moon ascended, all effort to fight it proved pointless. My frame gave way like an entrance I never realized was there. And what emerged from within was glorious. I am not a wolf. When this tale gets told, they'll label me a werewolf and tuck me into old legends. Yet that's not the truth of it. I exist in between standing on 2 legs when it suits me, dropping to 4 when it doesn't. My mind works with human cleverness, but my instincts have the unshakable certainty of a beast. That night, I truly hunted nothing like the awkward tries of earlier weeks. In open land, I took down a deer, running at 2 miles and never feeling weary. The kill was swift and neat, and then I fed. That is the thing Henry Wallace would have felt shame for, yet I feel no shame. I've moved past shame and guilt altogether. They're inventions of humanity, and I've cast them aside with my human limits. By daylight, I'm still mostly Henry. I can think clearly and write without confusion. But the lines between us are blurring. With every change, I drift further from my old self and move nearer to what I am meant to become. Soon the distinction between day and night, man and beast, will vanish. All that will remain is this: pure, complete, perfect. I can guess what crosses your mind as you read this. Whoever you are, you suspect I'm insane or deceived that I've dressed up violence as a spiritual awakening. Perhaps you're correct. Perhaps this is only insanity wrapped in philosophical language. But I disagree, because for once in my life, I feel whole, not torn apart. I'm done battling my own nature, done faking good manners and suppressing anger to seem respectable. I am precisely what I am: no excuses, no masks, and that feels like returning home. I'm leaving this journal in the shack out here because it will serve me no longer. Writing is a human custom. And I'm releasing every human custom. Martha may take the farm, and Brooks may close his case. The townspeople can believe whatever tales grant them peaceful sleep. I'm heading north, into lands where people are scarce, and the wild still rules. I will hunt. I will run. I will live the life I was made for. And if anyone comes after me, if Brooks gathers a posse, if farmers arrive with rifles and self-righteousness deliver this message, the creature they pursue holds no fear of them. It feels pity for them. Since they remain bound to a falsehood, they keep pretending that being civilized elevates them above the animals they kill for meat. They keep trusting that a fragile coating of culture and faith makes them greater than the earth itself. I have seen past that lie. I have ripped it off and uncovered something more real beneath. The moon climbs higher, and I feel my skin beginning to tear. There's no pain now, only release. This is the final entry from Henry Wallace. Should I ever take up a pen again, it will be as a different being. A total one. The 12th of May, 1883. Private notes of Sheriff Brooks. We located the line shack, came across Wallace's journal, and read every last word. At dawn, we set out with 12 men, fully armed, and all resolved to finish this. For 2 days we trailed him, guided by tracks and hearsay. We saw kills as we traveled. Deer mostly, but near Willow Creek there was a bear cub ripped apart. The tracks around it looked unlike anything in the natural world. On the second night, we camped in a ravine. Setting round-the-clock guards, I took the midnight shift with Thomas Henderson. The moon had moved just past half, fading toward blackness. Near 2 in the morning, Thomas seized my arm and gestured to the ridge above camp. A figure stood there, outlined against the sky. It bore Henry Wallace's basic form, 2 arms, 2 legs, standing tall, but the dimensions were off. Its arms were overlong, and its head perched oddly on its neck. When it moved, it wasn't walking. It poured along like water, following a path. Thomas lifted his rifle. I ordered him to hold off, for the creature wasn't charging. It only observed, examining us the way a biologist studies bugs. For perhaps 5 minutes we stood frozen, human and creature. Not a twitch from either. Then it dropped onto 4 limbs and was gone over the ridge so quickly my eyes could barely follow. At first light, we combed the ridge and discovered footprints human feet. Yet the prints were pressed far deeper than any man could make, and the distance between strides measured 8 feet. That single encounter was all we ever had, even after 3 more days of searching with no fresh sign. It seemed either he'd learned to hide his trail, or he'd simply gone where we couldn't follow. We returned to town with nothing. The mayor was eager to raise a bigger force and summon hunters from nearby counties. I talked him into waiting, because I'd come to understand something out there in those wild nights. We are no longer pursuing Henry Wallace. Our quarry is whatever he used to be, sharper and quicker than us, and with no desire at all to rejoin civilization. The attacks here in the county have come to a halt. There hasn't been a livestock death in more than 7 days. It may have moved away, or it may have learned to feed only on wild prey. Whichever the case, it's no longer a concern for us, at least. That's what I keep insisting. Reflect on that moment on the ridge. How it gazed at us. Was it a farewell, or a demonstration of how swiftly it could destroy us? I'd like to think it was the former, but I fear it was the latter. Martha Wallace has filed for divorce in absentia. She is selling the farm and relocating to the east. Upon telling her about the discovery of Henry's journal, she inquired if I believed he might still be living. I affirmed that. Then she asked whether he remained the same Henry. I gave no reply, for I am uncertain and unsure if it holds any significance now. The Henry Wallace we knew no longer exists. What remains is wholly different. The 3rd of June, 1883. An unsigned letter arrived at the Kansas Territorial Office and was passed along to Sheriff Brooks. It appeared beneath my door this morning. It bore no postmark or signature, only one page penned in a script I barely recognized. Yet, I knew it well. I have examined it for weeks. That handwriting belongs to Henry Wallace, or what his hand once was. The letter says, "To whoever discovers this, I write from the highlands north of the Republican River. The towns are far behind me. Beyond them, there are no fields, no boundaries, no souls who imagine the wilderness can be subdued. The transformation is complete. By daylight, I retain human thoughts and recollections. Yet they seem remote, like tales recounted about a man I once was. When night falls beneath the moon, I become what I was destined to be. I harbor no remorse for Kansas, the cattle, the terror, even Jacob Miller. Each was essential to my evolution. Yet Martha weighs on me. She warranted more than a spouse who vanished into his true self. Convey to her that I am content, that the man she wed attained tranquility, even at the cost of forsaking humanity. I shall not come back to civilized lands. This creature I have become dwells in the gaps of civilization, the woods, the prairies, the peaks where people are guests, not masters. I will chase and sprint, existing as beasts do, free of guilt or introspection. Search for me if you wish. But I will remain hidden. In daylight, I've mastered concealing my identity, mingling with trappers and merchants as needed. Come night, I outrun your fastest horses and outwit your methods of pursuit. Yet you won't chase me. For in your hearts you feel relief, glad the monster departed. Glad you needn't face what I embodied. I stood for the truth you refused to embrace. Civilization is a decision, not an inevitability. The untamed persists within every one of you, interred beneath social agreements and church pews. Your whole lives are spent crushing it, extinguishing it, acting as though it was never there. I simply ceased my pretense. That alone is my transgression. The moon shines brilliantly tonight. For once, I am at peace. Farewell. I've perused this letter repeatedly and shared it with no soul. What could I possibly utter? That the beast we pursued has achieved satisfaction, that wickedness has found serenity. For it is not the carnage or the metamorphosis that haunts me, but rather the contentment in those closing lines. The moon is luminous this night. For the first time, I am secure. What form of security demands abandoning your humanity? Whether Henry Wallace still roams those lands, I cannot say. Whether he lives or perished, whether he is human, animal, or a hybrid of both, remains a mystery. Yet one truth is clear. We did not rescue him, not for lack of effort, but because he rejected salvation. He made his decision embracing the wilderness over the tame, impulse over morality, transformation over permanence, and at times, beneath the radiant full moon in the quiet hours, I question whether he held the correct view. Could it be that we are the ones leading partial existences, that society is the prison rather than the refuge? Yet grief inevitably arrives, and I am reminded of my identity, my essence, human, for good or ill. Henry Wallace was a friend, a neighbor, an upright person by every important standard, until he transformed into something other. The investigation concluded formally categorized as missing, presumed dead. The assault ceased, the townsfolk moved forward, and ordinary life resumed. Yet I have secured his journal within my desk, hidden away from all other eyes, for eventually, someone may need the truth that monsters genuinely exist, that they may be your neighbor, your companion, your spouse, that they roam among us, concealed beneath flesh and courteous behavior, awaiting the moon to unleash them.